Okay, I'll hand over to you, Keith.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining. I'll just go ahead and share these slides. But yeah, as Sarah says, if there's any questions, just feel free to raise the hand. Otherwise, we'll almost definitely have some time at the end to go through any questions as well. Okay, so let's see if this comes up okay. Okay. No, it's just taken a while. Sorry, one moment. Let's try that. No, okay. Right, I'll just go ahead and share the screen. For some reason, this isn't sharing. Let's do this.
It's probably Teams at my end, Keith. I'm useless at Teams.
Oh, no worries. Right, let's try this. Okay, so is that showing okay there, Sarah? Perfect, thank you. Okay, great. Well, yep. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. With great power apps comes great reusability. Sorry about that, but yep. Thank you, Sarah and ShortList Recruitment, for the opportunity to speak today, and thanks for everyone who's joined. Thanks for your time. I recognise a lot of names in the list there, so it's great to have so many people coming along to heckle or support, or whichever it may be today. So thanks for coming along. Really appreciate it. Bit about me. I'm Keith Atherton. I've been a solutions architect and software developer for over 20 years now. I've worked in lots of different sectors and companies throughout the UK and USA. But for now, I'm pretty settled. I'm in Edinburgh. I'm a senior developer for an IT consultancy there called Quorum. So it's anything from designing systems, doing the development, pre-sales, pretty much anything as well. So if anyone's got any questions they'd rather ask me after the session, again, there should be some time at the end, or if you'd rather ask me away from this session, just feel free to connect with me. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, so just feel free to connect there. I'm also a Power App super user, which was a lovely surprise that happened fairly recently, along with I know many other people who are on the call today as well, including Stuart. I know Charlie and a few other people have got that recently too. So, okay, with that, I'll make a start. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at several different things to do with reusability in Power Apps. So we're going to look at the benefits of reuse. We're going to look at some user interface and code reuse and different ways of achieving that. We're going to look at some challenges of reuse, and there aren't too many. And we're going to look at some upcoming features as well. Okay, so a bit of background where I've come from with this. Recently, I've been using Power Apps quite a lot, mostly with Canvas apps. And when I first started to use them, I was actually helping someone out within an organization who was not a developer. They were actually working in marketing. Very nice person, very intelligent, but not from a developer background. So they'd created an app which needed a screen with 50 buttons on it, lots of buttons. They wanted to lay them out, which they did in a big grid. And what they did, this is not the screen, but this is kind of representative of it. So what they did is they had a big screen, 50 buttons, and they'd manually created each one by one, laid them out, got to the end, and then realized, you know what, I want a different color for that button. So what they did is they went back through, and for every one of the buttons, they had to change the color. And then other things came up, could we just have, maybe the button a bit bigger there, or the font a different size? And it was something that when we worked through, we realized quite quickly this is not the most efficient way of working. And we started to look into a way of making this a bit more repeatable, a bit more reusable, and just making things more efficient, just to make life a lot easier. So I'll come on to the solution later, but the short version is we use something called a gallery. That way we could actually just have a template for what we wanted the button to look like, and it then just repeated throughout the screen. We adjusted it, tweaked how much it would wrap. what the width, what the height was, and so on and so on. But it was a way of just having something that then gets repeated, made life much easier. So whenever there was a change in the future, we just changed the template and it affected all of the buttons at the same time. So yeah, many of us might be familiar with galleries, but it was a simple, but effective solution for this problem. So that was one example, but we'll look at some other benefits of reuse in general as well. Okay, so with software development and many other industries, we've got this concept of don't repeat yourself or dry, just a way of avoiding duplication of effort. That can often lead to faster development. Again, if we've got something that's a reusable component, something we can repeat, use time and time again, take it from the toolbox and reuse it, that can lead to a faster development rather than creating everything from scratch. If we're using reusable user interface components, that's going to have a consistent user interface or UI. Same with code behavior as well. If we're calling the same function in multiple places, the same piece of code, and it's thoroughly tested, we've got the confidence it's going to behave the same way every time. And just as I mentioned there, the reliability of using components that have been fully tested. So if we do have something that, again, has been really thoroughly tested, all the edge cases we can think of, it's been very thorough, we do have that confidence it's going to be reliable if we place it on a different screen, in a different app, or elsewhere. And also there's something to be said for building a library of reusable components as well. So again, if you build something, it's designed to be generic or reusable, we place it in some kind of library or toolbox that you can use again and again. Whenever you create a new screen or a new app, you do have that toolbox to pick from, which may have that customized date picker you need, or that gallery that's designed to have the theming for your organization. So there are benefits there too. Okay, so we'll look at some user interface reuse to start with. So as I mentioned there, with the repeatable buttons, in this case, we used a gallery control. Many of us will be familiar with these as well, but I'm kind of covering everything today just to, everyone, despite level or experience, can pick these things up. But the gallery control is really useful. I see it as a good way of repeating things. You can show a set of data in there. You can actually have different controls within it as well. So in the two examples at the top there with the blue title bars, we can see the one on the left there, we've got something that looks like it repeats, a contact list. We've got email address, a location, and a company name by the look of it. And again, that's repeated 3 times, and that's pulling the data for those accounts. And then to the right of that, we've got a more simplified version, which is just showing company names. So again, just a single text label in that case with an arrow button to the right-hand side. But we can actually include other controls as well. So if we look at the bottom there, this is actually designed by Reza Durrani, who's got some really good designs. You can show there that at the bottom, that is a gallery that shows all those laptops on it and those different devices. So it doesn't just have to be plain text. It doesn't have to be boring or simple. You can use images, you can use, different colors, different fonts, and you can build it up in many different ways. So it's actually quite powerful. And you can even nest galleries within themselves as well. You can make it quite advanced if you need to. So again, really good examples there, but it's worth thinking as well, if anything needs repeated, whether it be that example of the buttons or data from the accounts table or something else, it could even be for a menu system. If you've got something that would repeat, but you need a consistent look on the UI or a ribbon control across the top of an app, it could be a good candidate for using a gallery. When we use galleries as well, we do have a few predefined templates that we can use. We've got a few list formats as suggestions, which is mostly text, some with images as well, and some galleries as well, which is a bit more like the photo gallery you'd see on your phone in an app. You can have multiple columns, overlay text, if you will. These are really powerful starting points, but of course you can always start with a blank page if you need, or you can actually start with one of these and just make any adjustments and customize as you need to as well. So again, could be a good time saver to get you started. Okay, so we'll look at some Canvas components now. So for those who haven't used them, components are really usable, just to have a reusable thing you can use throughout an app. So in the example at the very top left, we've got that menu system that we were talking about earlier, in this case with home, admin, and so on, with an arrow button to the right-hand side. In this case, we can see the snippet there from the Power App Studio. We can actually add that using the tree view. So alongside the screens, you've got components as well. And again, once it's in the component, you can reuse this multiple times on the same screen or across multiple screens as well. So it's a good way if you've got something and you're creating the same thing from scratch again and again, it could be that using a component is a good choice for that. And one of the good things with components is that you can extend the functionality quite well using properties as well. So we've got some of their like input properties where you can actually pass in values from the app to the component. So let's say you might be passing in a text value to display a certain option for a button like home or admin. Another way could be an output property, and sometimes they use this for like a code library. Like I would have properties on there that would perform some work. I might pass in some parameters as well, get me the last day of the month, format this title, this particular way, format this date. If you wanted these things where the component would actually return a result into the app, using the output properties could be really valuable for that. There's also a third one as well, which is called behavior formulas. So these are really, really useful. These are a way, they are experimental feature at the moment, which I'll cover later on in terms of experimental and preview as well. But behavior formulas are really kind of like event handles, I see them as. So you can have a component that has a particular action. Maybe there's a button on the component with the on select event or property, as they call it, but you may want to expose that to the app. So I've used this in some cases where I've had a component for a modal message dialog box with a yes, no button, but I actually use that as a component. But then on the screen where I've placed it, I've actually got some bespoke Power Effects code, depending if they've clicked the yes or the no button. So using behaviors is a good way to raise to the app, yes button's been clicked or the no button's been clicked, or they've hit cancel or okay, or whatever you choose to use it for. So taking components a bit further, you can actually use component libraries. So it's a separate project within itself. And as the name suggests, we've got a library of multiple components. So if you do this, this does make it available for other makers or developers working on apps to say, okay, what components do we have in the organization? Okay, I've got these bespoke date pickers or combo boxes or galleries with particular formatting. If you place them in a component library, other apps that you create can then refer to them. And again, you've got confidence knowing that these different apps, let's say you're creating internal apps for an organization, you've got 10, 20 apps, they're all going to be using that same consistent component in each of the apps. So this is kind of the recommended way to go if you did want to share those components, again, across several apps. Okay, some other options within UI is grouping elements together. This is fairly straightforward. So we've got the example there on the screen with group one. This is 3 controls that have been grouped together, which you can do with the context menu there. We can see group or ungroup in the menu, or you can use Control G, many different hotkeys within the Power App Studio. So this is a good way of kind of bundling them together, almost just kind of kind of collectively holding them, but it's a group is not a control within itself. So when you're on the group, you can see those common properties that they've got, whether it be visible or if there's a text property across them all, and you can actually change some of them as well. So if they've all got visible set to true and you've got the group selected, you can set them to false, but it would affect all of the controls within the group. And to take things a bit further, which is a bit more preference, a bit more of a preference for me, is the container control. So this is similar to groups, but this is an actual control within its own right. So the good thing with containers is you can logically relate those groups together to create hierarchies. You can nest containers as well. Now the container, because it's its own control, does have its own properties. So again, you can set things like visible, true, false, but this would affect the container control itself. Of course, anything it's containing would get affected as well. But that's just one thing to bear in mind. Another benefit or few benefits with containers as well is in the example there, we've got two, one called left container, which has got manage contacts on there, and the right container, which is manage appointments, is that if you use, screen readers can use these containers to understand the layout of these controls. So it's really important for accessibility. So if you used to use a screen reader or even a keyboard user using tab to move through the controls, it would move to that first container and then go through the controls. So typically in the UK, it's top to bottom, left to right, as it would read. It would see manage contacts, A then B, and then move to the next container, manage appointments, C then D. So again, this is really valuable. Otherwise, without the containers, it may just be going left to right. It may just see manage contacts, manage appointments, A, C, B, D. So it's, there are many benefits for using containers. So I would recommend them. So we covered a few there, but I'm just going to look at differences between containers and groups. So as mentioned there, groups don't have their own properties. They just show common properties for the controls that have actually been collected. But containers do have their own properties. They are their own control. So you've got your own things like visible, color, border, so on and so on. And again, containers do affect the app layout as well, which again, it's also useful for screen readers, and you can understand the structure of the app a lot better as well. Okay, so this one's super simple. It's really basic, but it could be useful. It's just simple duplication of elements. So many things like screens and components, you do get the duplicate option when you use the context menu. So if you had a screen, you wanted to create something very, very similar, you could just do a duplicate. Then you've got your starter for 10. Then you can go ahead and make customizations, add controls, tweak things. So if that's useful, it saves building it all the way from scratch. Many other elements, many controls and things can be copied and pasted as well. Again, super simple, but it could be a simple way of just replicating something multiple times, could be useful. And also with apps as well, you can clone them using save as. So again, if you need an app to be something similar to what you already have, again, this could just give you that good starter for 10, save you building everything from the ground up. Okay, so talking of reusability, one thing to bear in mind is reusing an app across multiple devices or multiple screen sizes as well. So I just mentioned a bit about responsive web design. This is often about creating web pages that look good on all devices. So it doesn't matter on the aspect ratio, the size of it, the resolution. It's something we want to automatically adjust. And many of us are quite familiar with this. So in the screenshot there, you can see whether it's a laptop, phone, tablet, or PC monitor, we want something that would adjust. And this often means that it's going to resize the different elements on the screen. It might use, for mobile, it might use a smaller image instead of a large image, which, is bigger in size and is just excessive for a small device. Sometimes it may even show and hide different components as well. Might not just be resizing or realigning. It might be showing and hiding depending on that, if it's a much smaller screen size. So we can do this with Power Apps, which is good. And we do have several responsive layouts as well. There are some available. So when we go ahead and create the new screen, you can either start with a blank, or you can create things with split screens and sidebars and things like this. And often they're built with containers, which are really the main building blocks for responsive design. So again, this is really valuable if you're considering somewhere, let's say if you worked in construction, people using like ruggedized tablets, medium sized, but they also wanted to check things on their phone as well. It had to adapt to those different layouts, or portrait and landscape. It could be something where this is actually quite relevant, and it means you could use it on multiple devices instead of saying, oh, it has to be a phone and it has to be portrait. You might be able to extend it and make it usable for other devices too. So within Power Apps, there's a really good article on Microsoft Learn which explains how to make layouts dynamic. So to get this kind of responsive design, you can actually change the alignment of components. So in this example, super basic, but we've got this portrait orientation on the left with an upper and lower component, almost square-like, just two components. And if we was, let's say this was on a mobile phone and we turned it to landscape, on the right hand side is what we'd want from the landscape orientation. So this is where the upper has moved to the left and the lower has moved to the right. So again, we're seeing all the full content. It's been realigned to show it in a different format rather than just squashing everything into that different form factor. So the article is really good. If anyone's got an interest in this, it's really worth a quick read through. It explains how you can use formulas to create this dynamic layout to, again, change the alignment of different components, different parts. In terms of testing these responsive layouts, of course, having the the actual device to do the testing is really, that's the best option. But most web browsers do provide developer tools, and Chrome were one of the first to provide these really strong developer tools, or dev tools as they refer to them. So in the screenshot there, we can see that you can actually use a dev tools featuring Chrome called device mode, and this is where you can actually specify that resolution, whether it's portrait, landscape, whether it's from a list of devices, a certain iPhone, a certain Samsung tablet, whatever the case may be. And that way you can actually see, does it align quite as you expect? Because it's really at the heart of it, a Power App is just a web app. Underneath, it's just a web page. So you can run this in the browser. You can use those features there. But again, the key thing ideally is to have the actual device, if that is possible. So another thing just along those lines, talking about testing different responsive layouts as well, is there was a good thing mentioned at the Microsoft Business Applications launch event yesterday, which I threw on very quickly this morning because this could be quite useful, which is they're announcing a device preview feature where you don't need to rely on the browser dev tools. You can actually use it within the Power App Studio as well. So that's something coming soon, hopefully. Okay, so this one I'll go through about reusing customized controls. This one is, let's say you've got a new app, you have a screen, you've got the out-of-the-box controls that you can pull from Power App Studio. Let's say you've got a text input and a drop-down control, but your organization, they're quite particular on the font that you use, the font family, the font size, the colors that you use as well. They want it to match the organization's theme. If you pull the out-of-the-box controls, and there are some basic theming that you can do within the studio at the moment, but if you was to try and reuse those and you had, I don't know, 50 text inputs across several forms, if you had to then change the color and the font and everything with those, it may be a bit cumbersome just to go through and change them all. If you want that look and feel of the app to be consistent with your brand or with your organization. So there's an approach here that Matthew Devaney put on his blog, which I think is really good, which is if you needed to customize some of these out-of-the-box controls, you can create a new screen. You can leave it hidden so users don't use it and call it a template screen or something like that. You can then add these controls that you think you're going to repeat again and again throughout the app. Go ahead, change the font, change the size, change the colors, whatever you need to do. And these are almost like your gold versions of these components. So when you do create screens within the app that users will see, instead of just picking the out of the box from the insert options, you can actually just do a copy and paste from the template screen, add them to this new screen, and then you're up and running. You've got this themed thing that's ready to go. So it's kind of simple, but really effective, and a good kind of workaround in lieu of having, let's say, stronger theming options at the moment within Power App Studio. So it's a simple approach, but really worthwhile. Also, yeah, sure.
No, go ahead, mate. Sorry, I thought you were finished with that slide. Give me a shout when you're finished with that slide.
Yeah.
So
cheers.
all it was is I used something similar to this, but basically refer back to the properties of this. So when I create a text field, for example, I would say text the font equals gold text field dot font, size equals gold text field dot size.
Got you.
And build on top of that, you can do customization to say give them dynamic size and dynamic fonts, etc., through pickers and things like that in a settings field.
Got you. Yeah.
Really useful extension. I'll share this over with you after we're done, mate. It's a really cool way of doing it.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Stuart. That's actually a really good approach too. And I think in Matthew's article and other places as well, there's been things along those lines as well, Stuart, where people have, let's say, set those values in the app on start at the very beginning and then referred to them as the global variables as well, rather than just a full copy and paste from the template. So yeah, thanks for that. That's a really good approach actually. So just as well, Sancho, who also does a lot of great work for the community, is kind of taken this concept as well and created a branding template app, which I think is at version 3 last time I checked. And this is a similar thing where you can set these theming things like the colors, and we actually just generate these controls as a good starting point to say, okay, I've used these colors or these properties across the controls. Here's the starting point for you for the rest of the screens that you work on. Okay, so moving on from UI, we'll look at some code reuse options as well. So yeah, kind of along the lines that we just talked about there with Stuart's good suggestion, which is the way of the concept of constants, or again, more in theory constant than an immutable fixed value. But this is quite common in many different programming languages, a way of setting a value that you refer to throughout the app, throughout this, the same screen or on other screens as well. So if you do this, you can actually place values. So you can set these on app on start. Again, there's other ways of doing this, but the example at the top there, which is, not ideal, setting some global variables just there with these actual values, and then, setting those hard-coded values each time, -20, -20, +10, so on and so on. But the concept below, which is using, again, constants, which is a way of having that single source of truth in the app. So you're not, hard coding these values all over the place. You can set them as constants at the top and then refer to them throughout. So that way in future, if you want to change the value of that attack from -20 to -30, or the health bonus needs increasing, when you change it in that one place, it's then replicated and used everywhere else. You've not had to find all 10 instances throughout the app where you've got to change this number. So another thing we'll go on to as well, which is called named formulas. This is also experimental. Again, we'll cover what that means later on. Named formulas look really powerful. This is a way you can actually simplify the initialization. You can reduce the upload time potentially. You can definitely reuse the logic and improve maintainability of an app as well. So to get to this, if you go to the app and then go to formulas property, you can set these values, which we've got in the code example below. So with this one, this is a way where you can set these almost like functions or formulas that get referred to again throughout the app. So in this case, we've got user email, which calls the user function and gets the email property. And you can see with some of the others like user title, it actually refers to other named formulas within the same block as well. So it's actually quite powerful. So when you're within the app on a different screen, you need to refer to these. You can always access these formulas anytime. It's always going to be up to date because when you refer to it, that's when the calculation is performed. The definition is immutable. It can't change. Once it's set in the app formulas, it can't be changed in any PowerFX code block anywhere else. It's just set in this single place. So you've got confidence. Once it's set there, consistently, that's what's going to happen. It's going to work that same way every time. And again, the calculation can be deferred, which is along the lines of it being available. So anyone who uses .NET, uses LINQ, the language integrated queries, or there's many things in Java and elsewhere as well. The great thing with these is that calculation and performance hit is only performed when you actually refer to it. So if you never refer to user phone anywhere in the app, this never gets run. If you do, in a screen that a user uses after 10 minutes of use, it only gets called at that point. So that's another thing. It's not a big hit when you start the app. It's only when you call them. So another thing that I found useful as well is environment variables. If you need something consistent across the entire environment, okay, let's say if you've got 3 environments, development, test, production, if you need something that's going to be the same value all the way across, you have multiple apps, multiple things, environment variables can be used in flows as well. So it's good. It's more reusable within the Power Platform in general. You typically set these under a solution. And the way you do it, you've got a screen like the entry just there. In this example, I've got one called report URL. There is a default value. This is a data type text, but you could use yes, no. You could use different values. You could use JSON, if you will. And then the current value at the very bottom there is the value for that environment. So if this is for the development environment, this is actually a link to a Power BI report URL. I can actually specify that current value just there. But if you needed to then move an app from dev to test, and the test has a different Power BI report URL, which is, quite possible, then you don't need to open up the app and change that hard-coded URL. You can actually just refer to this environment variable. So the way you add it, we've got a couple of data sources at the top just there, environment variable definitions and values, and then you can actually call it in the code. Again, this is a super simple, crude example, but we actually just call it there, the schema name, we've got the CL report URL, and we actually pull the value in from there. So can be really useful in many cases. There's also a preview feature with the Azure Key Vault where you can actually reference secrets at the moment as well. But again, I'll cover preview and experimental a bit later on. Another thing that is really powerful, and this is a bit more of a pro developer or a sort of a code first approach, is Power Apps Component Framework, or PCFs. So this is where you can create components that you can use in Canvas apps, but model-driven apps as well. You can use HTML, TypeScript, and CSS, and you can build up reusable controls. Again, if you wanted something very bespoke, a very bespoke themed control that had certain behaviors, or it actually had a UI that was kind of quite specific that doesn't come with the out-of-the-box component, an option is to create a PCF that you can use within apps as well. And on the screen there, we've got some of the PCF gallery, which is created by a lot of great people in the community who've actually created many that they've shared there. So you can see things like ChatGPT controls, we've got some postcode validation and other things as well. So again, you don't need to share them and make them public like this. You could keep them private within your organization. But again, another powerful feature if you need something quite bespoke. Something else worth mentioning as well in terms of reusable components is the Power Platform Center of Excellence Starter Kit as well. This is great. It gives you lots of components and tools out of the box. So this is great if you need to think about things like administration or getting adoption of things, or nurturing as they refer to it. It gives you lots of interesting things to look into. Excuse me. And yeah, there's many components in there, such as theming components and other things as well. And as the name suggests, this is a starter kit. So if you did look into this and start using it, it's really about getting you think about these different things like the governance and admin. Which parts of the kit do you need to use? What do you need to customize? It's really just to get you thinking and to see how it works best for your organization. Another thing that's useful, someone flagged to me recently, which is a really good shout, which is using Git version control to edit Canvas apps. This is still experimental, last time I checked, but you can actually use Git, so you can actually connect to GitHub or Azure DevOps, which is quite common. You can use existing Git tools, so you can do the common things like manage your PRs, your pull requests. You can check the version history and so on. It just needs connecting up. You connect to the repo this way. There's a good bonus feature as well, that often this lets more than one person edit the Canvas app at one time. I've seen a few quirks with this, but most of the time it works really well. So if you're working on an app, you have another maker that tries to open an app and you get that annoying locked message, you need to wait till Jim is finished with it or whoever. This is something that could be useful and let you both work at the same time, or more than two people, of course, as well. So there's an extra button, like a sync button you get at the very top in the toolbar. Could be very powerful for multi-maker or multi-developer projects. It's worth checking the limitations there as well. There are some in the documentation. All right, so we're going to look at some challenges of reuse. There aren't too many of these, luckily. Certainly some of the two big ones are really the time to consider the design as well. So if you're considering reusable components up front, you've got a fine detailed design. You know exactly where things are going to be laid out, what you're going to need. You've had the luxury of the time to work on that design ahead of time. It could be the extra time to say, okay, I've used this in 3 places now. I'll actually consolidate it to a component that I reuse in multiple places. That is the nice option to have. The other option is if you've got something that already exists and you need to refactor what you already have, how easy is that? How possible is that to actually make something say, well, I've added a new screen that also uses this gallery, which is almost identical to the other one. Can I actually make them into a reusable component, and test it? Does it still work as expected? Is the behavior the same? I create a new app. Okay, that component needs using again. I'll make a component library. So if you're going to architect things reactively and kind of refactor things after the fact, sometimes it is worth considering, do I have enough time to make this reusable, or do I just need to do a short fix of a copy and paste for now gets me going. When there's more time, we'll refactor, retest, and try and do it a cleaner way if possible. Okay, so just to move on to some upcoming features, we've looked at what's possible there already, but we're going to see what other options we've got existing and what's coming up as well. So there's a good one in the planner at the moment where you can drag and drop to build these responsive pages more easily. So we talked about that responsive design earlier. I can lay things out quite easily. I can adjust and realign. That's going to come with drag and drop. That's been part of the recently announced 2023 release wave 1. So looking at a public preview in July this year, and it's scheduled to go GA September this year as well. So again, if that's something of interest, that's worth keeping an eye on. More code related this one, but you can reuse PowerFX formulas with something called user-defined functions. This one's looking at a public preview in June, which is really not too far away now. I saw this announcement at the Microsoft Power Platform conference last September, which was a really interesting talk, because this moves a bit more towards this pro dev or code first approach of making the PowerFX code a bit more powerful, a bit more reusable. So this one's where you can split large formulas down to smaller ones. They can call each other. They can be recursive, as this example on the screen shows. So yeah, really, really powerful. There could be a lot of scope for this one as well. So worth keeping an eye out for this one. So I mentioned a few times, particularly with upcoming features as well, things like preview, experimental, things like this as well. So again, for those who may not be aware of this, preview features, as it says, are features that aren't complete, but they are made available on a preview basis. So that way customers can get early access and provide feedback to Microsoft in this case. So really, if you see something with preview or experimental, something along those lines, often it does clarify that you get separate terms of use for them. They often have a limited or restricted functionality as well, and they're not intended for production use, and they're not really supported for production use. It may be something that Microsoft is still working on. They get the feedback, they may change it, they may scrap it, so it's something that if you wouldn't necessarily want something in a production system, if Microsoft say in a few months change their mind and remove it, or change the behavior of how it works, and then something with a client or your organization doesn't behave as expected or just outright doesn't work. So something to bear in mind. So I mentioned it briefly with the upcoming features, but there's also this release planner as well. So it's Dynamics 365 and Microsoft Power Platform combined release planner. So it's under the business applications umbrella, but you can specify, you can just filter to just the Power Platform features if you care, or just the Dynamics 365 if you want to as well. So if you look on the screen, you've got some good examples there. You've got things like breaking down by topic. This one's efficient maker experiences. This is Power Platform I'm looking at. That tab is for planned, but you can also see coming soon features, try now features as well. And when you expand them, you get more details to say, when's it in public preview, when's it in GA, when's it, available to use. Often they have a link to the documentation, so you can see a bit more detail on what's involved as well. So yeah, really, really useful. So I'll give a couple of mentions to some blogs as well, just to finish up. So we've got the Microsoft Power Platform blog. I came to this a bit late, but it's really useful for upcoming news, announcements, or good sort of case studies of how things have used, which can give you good food for thought. There's also some product specific blogs as well for the different components, the different services within Power Platform. So if you're, app specific, most of my work is with apps. I also use many of the other features, but it's mostly apps and automate for me. You can drill into those and look into those specific blogs if you need to as well. There's also the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community blog. Again, really useful. I join quite a few of their community calls, which are always really good. Often really good demos, good announcements. It's really interesting. So often you can go back and see the recordings of those, sessions, those events as well. So again, another good place to get information. And there are plenty of good blogs out there. And also, there's the What's New in Power Platform blog as well, which is actually written by Stuart, who spoke up earlier and gave the good tip earlier on. So this is a favorite blog of mine. I do follow this one. Stuart's got a really good writing style. Everything's really clear. It is one of the go-tos for mine. And there was a good article on the named formulas that we covered it earlier on as well. So yeah, this is good. There's so much coming out with Power Platform. Power Apps as well, specifically, it's just constantly moving, new features, and that's part of the interesting, thing for me as well, is that it's constantly moving, new features, keeps evolving, keeps growing. So it's worth kind of keeping an eye on the news that comes out. It can get a bit overwhelming too sometimes, but it's good just to keep an idea on the new features. Okay, so just to wrap things up, we covered a few topics. We looked at the benefits of reuse. Again, most of the times it could be really, really beneficial to look into architecting reusability. We've got different ways of doing UI and code reuse as well. We do have some challenges, but it's often around the design and architecture of things. And we've got some upcoming features and where to find them as well. So we've reached the end. If you're still here, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. We do have some time for questions. We've got 15 minutes left or so of this session. If you'd rather ask after the session, just connect with me. My name's on screen. Again, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Always happy to help, like many in the community are, who help me too. I'm always grateful for that. So if anyone's got questions, I'll see if I can help. Otherwise, I'll pass back to Sarah.
We've got a hand up there. Is that Pascal?
Yeah, good evening, very good evening. I have one doubt. Can you please rectify it?
Hi there. Yeah. Hi, Bhaskar.
I have a doubt whether we can reuse the Canvas app into model-driven app.
That's a good question. I've not done too much with model-driven apps, so I'm afraid I've not tried that myself. Might be one for if anyone else can help on the call. Otherwise, yeah, might be looking into the Microsoft documentation for that one. But that would be a really handy feature if you could do that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry I can't help with that one, Bhaskar.
Yeah, no other questions. Your teaching is very fine, and reusability concept is very nice. I really appreciated you.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, more hands up. Jamie?
Yeah, there's a couple of comments, and I'll sort of come back to Pascal's point. So I mostly work with model-driven apps, so it's always useful when we've got to talk about Canvas apps. Well, I think one of the great things about the reusable components is, and this is across the work, when you get like a project manager or BA that goes, you can to the user, you can have anything you want, and you go like, no, we've got these reusable components, so let's not have, these are what we're using. And I think that's when you've got them already defined, it means you can temper some people's enthusiasm, and that's sort of like a really big thing. I think I'd say, it's sometimes it's do you do reusable first or not? And I think just across the board, I have experience where sometimes you do reusability, where you have to be careful that you're not making it too generic, that actually you're doing more work each time you're reusing it. But when it comes to model-driven apps, it's very difficult to reuse components. And at where I was working last place, we did a lot of what we call tactical apps. They were very similar themed in terms of it was a healthcare regulator. If they wanted a new type of inspection, it needed to set up. But what we did was, this is where design standards came in. So basically we said, right, for every status, there'll be a corresponding view. Reason, and that was our design standard, and that was how we made it reusable. When we sort of talked about navigation, we sort of had a really clear how we're going to do it. So it's more about, when it comes to model-driven apps, it's about design standards
Yeah, no, thank you, Jamie. That's a really good point because, yeah, as you say, it is related because that mindset, that methodology or approach you would use, it does color and shape how things can progress rather than, as you say, some person might promise I could do anything, but then that leaves the scope completely open for some completely, bespoke things that could take a long time. But if you've got that expectation of, we've got this toolbox of others will be reviewed if we add to the toolbox or library of reusable components, that then has to go through a process, how we review if that happens. And another good point Jamie made there as well, which was considering making things more reusable and generic from the start can be excessive as well and can be redundant. And I did have this with I did work with a developer who, really smart person. They made something that was like a very generic thing in .NET. It was using interfaces, lots of polymorphism for a logging component. It's like, right, if we need to log to text or database or Windows event log, blah, 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 extended all these ways, we only ever use database in the end. So, the first hour of his work was super valuable. The rest of it for the next 3 years was never used at all. So it's kind of, jumping the gun, trying to be helpful, but it was just redundant, unfortunately, in that case. So we learned a lot of lessons from that. But yeah, thanks again, Jamie. That was really good. Any other questions from anyone else?
I've noticed, Stensine, you had your hand up a couple of times there. Are you still with us?
Yeah. So I think Jamie already covered what I was gonna say anyway, so that's fine.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jamie. I should bring you along more often. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stensine. Great. Any other questions?
I would say, I can recall, but there was this part where we were talking about how you could reference some like how I do it before is like, for instance, when you want to call the user's email, for instance, or his name or ID from the Active Directory. Sorry about that. From the Active Directory, right? So what I usually do is on the onStart property, that's how we used to do it before. So we set up the variables, right? So via our email, we set it to the user's email and all of the information. Then we now make it reusable in the sense that we just reference it, isn't it? Instead of just every time you're always sending, calling API to the Active Directory, which can really slow down the application. So I just wanted to say, in that sense, what's the difference between the approach you talked about and this one, which is, I don't know, it looks kind of similar.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part there, Stensine. So it's how is it different? Sorry. Oh, sorry, I think I just missed that bit there, Stensine. If you're still with us, yeah, just I think I missed the last part there.
Hello?
Oh, hi there. Sorry, sorry. What was your example again? Sorry.
Yeah, so I kind of missed. I joined kind of late, so I'm sorry about that.
Right.
So there was this part where you displayed how you could reference, like, for instance, the user informations, right? So instead of having to, having to call the API from the Active Directory, for instance, you just have it set out, and when you're building your application, you can just easily reference it. And you can use it basically across every different screens and components within the application. So what I was saying is, what's the difference between that and when you use a variable, like for instance, like a global variable, and you can still be able to reference that same information?
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, good question. So the example, if I remember correctly, was probably from the named formulas, which is an experimental feature at the moment. So this is something that is intended that you can call a function from the app formulas location of storing it there. It means that if you did call that anywhere throughout the app, that performance of actually going to do the work of calling the function only happens when you reference it on a screen later on. If you was to have it in a global variable, let's say an app on start, when things open, if it was doing something a bit expensive, a bit heavy in terms of performance, whether you refer to it in the app or not, it does happen at that occasion, whether it be app on start or maybe the screen on visible property as well. So both good options. It's just a different way of using it. Certainly with the app formulas, again, another benefit there, as well as deferring the execution, is that's immutable. It's not going to change the definition. Whereas if you was using a global variable and somebody used it in another screen and then actually called the set function, actually changed that global variable to a different value, if that's important, you need a consistent fixed constant at the start, there may be a risk that that value has changed or the definition has changed. So it's kind of, slightly different in that way, but I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Good question. Great. Any other questions? Again, if you think of something later, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn.
So I think I'm only connected to Sarah, but I'm not sure about your handle on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure. So it's just my name, Keith Atherton, and I'm on Twitter as well as Mr. Keith Atherton as well.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. That was
Great.
good.
Thanks, Sarah.
I
Thank
followed
you.
most of it. This is recorded, so I know there's people that couldn't make it that would like to see the recording, but also anyone who's here that would like to see that, just let me know and I can send over the link tomorrow. Sometimes it's useful to share with teams, isn't it, if there was something in there that'd be useful. But no, that was awesome. Just to touch on, I know there's a bit on the Wave 1 release and the upcoming features. You'll know Keith and Jamie definitely, but Stuart Baxter does quarterly VRT on those as well. So we've got one of those coming up with a full session on it. So hopefully you can come to that, Keith, and support Stuart.
Excellent. Yeah, Stuart always gives really good presentations. So yeah, I'll look forward to that one. Yeah. Very
detail orientated as well. So yeah, again, over my head in parts.
Or get your building power ups.
Yeah. So sorry, I do have I wouldn't really say a question, but have you heard about the modern components coming out from Power Apps?
Yeah, look really powerful. I've seen a few announcements and people give demonstrations on those as well. So yeah, really looking forward to getting started with those.
All right. So though, like I've tested it out though. Luckily enough, I did get it on my tenant. It's kind of limited at the moment, but yeah, I just wanted to get your own perspective of what you think about it. But that's all right.
Oh, great. No, good to know. Thanks.
Cheers.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. That was really good, Keith. And I look forward to seeing you speaking at more events.
Yeah, likewise.
Right, thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Sarah, for a great session. Goodbye.